welcome back to the Growing Together podcast with me, Sunny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
A podcast where we talk about everything under the sun related to growth and becoming the best version of yourself, both professionally and personally. And so we are back with another episode, as we are every Monday when this airs. It's Sunday when we're recording this because, again, I had a very lazy Saturday. I was so tired. And Cesar was just like, we're not recording today, are we? And I was like, no, we're not.
Everything is on her schedule.
I'm just tired all the time. After the work week, I just get drained. And then I think I have FOMO in the sense that I fear that if I don't take advantage of the time I have to sleep, I'm going to regret it, even though it's not like I can get it back. So I think I just feel the need to take advantage and sleep in and just not doing anything, because I know that the week coming I'll have to just,
It's funny though, because I feel like every time we're in this room recording, our allergies kick in.
No, yeah. I could be fine, and then the minute we start recording the podcast, my nose runs and I'm allergic to the podcast. No, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if the air purifier actually helps, because even when I have it in this room or in our room, it's just, I don't know, I feel the same. I don't want to be taking allergy medicine every morning either. So I guess some things we just got to deal with, which relates to our episode today. Not allergies, but it will somehow relate. But before we get into that, how are you feeling? How's your week gone, Cesar? How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I feel like I'm getting into the habit of getting myself better, I guess, in regards to just obviously physically and
tell us what you did yesterday, Cesar.
I did a little cycle class on YouTube. My brother has one of those Peloton.
Well, it's not a Peloton. It's a different brand, but it's similar.
Brand. Very similar. And I did one of the classes, and that thing kicked my ass.
Yes, because it's in the garage, and Cesar went down there, and Cesar was sweating. He goes, "I think I'm gonna throw up."
No, I felt like I was gonna throw. Oh my, holy crap! What's insane though is because I used to do some of these classes years ago with some friends on base, and I would push through it, and I would be amped and this is so awesome, but no, I've never felt this bad, and I'm man, I kind of self-reflected. I'm yeah, I gotta keep doing this. I gotta keep
and then I told Cesar, I was yeah, you can get up in the morning before we do the podcast and work out if you want. And he was yeah, I'm gonna do that. And this morning he goes, I think I'm gonna do Sundays as my rest day.
Yeah, I'm gonna
he was I just said, I was why, your legs hurt? And he was yeah, my legs and my abs hurt. Yeah, we'll probably still go on a walk later.
Yep.
But I tried it, and it's hard. It's definitely something, especially I feel if you're in the environment where you're doing it by yourself at home, and it is hard to push yourself. Whereas if you're in a class with other people, you're kind of more motivated to push yourself. So you really got to have a self-discipline when doing a class at home. But I think it's definitely good, and I'm glad that you got to do that. I also don't think that it was good that we had just eaten.
Yeah. Oh, then there was that too.
An hour ago, and so
I didn't want to use that as an excuse though.
So I'm that kind of makes sense as to why you feel that way too. We just had Cesar had steak fajitas, and I had birria tacos. So I'm I don't think this is the best time to be doing it, and a margarita. So I was oh gosh. But anyway, it's going. Seems like things are on the up and up.
Yeah, I would say they are, and good fortune is upon us, I think.
Good fortune is upon us. Okay.
It's what do you call those cookies? Yeah, the
fortune cookies.
The fortune cookies.
It is Chinese New Year.
It is. Yeah, the year of the rabbit, right?
Yeah. I looked at my I did one of those things online where it was what's your year, and I think I'm was born the year of the ox, and apparently the year of the rabbit isn't for me. It's saying I'm not supposed to have a good year, but I feel I've experienced the exact opposite, so I'm not ignoring it.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk today about something that's a little not as lighthearted, but I think it's important to talk about, and kind of around the theme of taking your life back after experiencing trauma. And I was reading online about trauma, from sources like mind.org.uk, Psychology Today, and WebMD about trauma. And I just think it's interesting when you really pick apart what trauma is and how it presents itself in your life and in your body and in your health, because it really does affect every area of our lives. And I don't think people really understand that enough. To like someone who has experienced trauma, it's gonna affect them in every way. Well, it affects people differently, but like people who are like dealing with trauma and it's manifesting itself in other ways, like I don't think we give those people enough grace to start. But I kind of wanted to talk about trauma and all that it is, how it impacts our bodies, and then like, you know, what can you do? Like, how do we deal with trauma? And I want to say before I start this, because me and Caesar are not experts. I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, or anything, but I read a lot on this because I think it's important to understand, because I think we all have gone through traumatic events in our lives, and it might not affect others the way it affects us. But I think it's important to realize how it could affect someone, or how it is affecting you, because you might not know that the reason you're presenting yourself a certain way is because of, you know, your past, and it's presenting itself in your life now, you know? So I wanted to talk about that. And it's actually funny because not funny. I shouldn't say funny. It's such a bad like way to say it, but you know, it's interesting because it said that 60% of men and 50% of women experience some type of trauma in their lifetime. And I was thinking about that, and like some people, like those are just statistics, you know, about like what's reported and what's not. And like I would argue that some people probably battle in secret, like you don't know about their trauma or about how it's affecting their lives.
Yeah, I would say that's probably 100% true. I mean, they probably get that from you know, surveys or collecting like, data.
And I think some people, like when it comes to trauma, especially because that information is probably presenting itself in like surveys, and people, you know, you're trusting that they're being honest on the survey. I think it becomes like a prideful thing too. Like if you talk to someone I would not say like, maybe like my parents, I don't think my parents would be open up to admitting to some of the fact that like this is trauma and this is how it's presented itself in my life, because it's a pride thing. You want to kind of portray this idea that you don't let those things affect you.
Yeah, there's obviously that point, right, where I would say probably more people go in that route, but then there's also the other aspect of it, because again, we don't know, everyone deals with things differently. That may be a part of them dealing with it and talking to a professional, right? Again, at the end of the day, we're not professionals. Is like possibly having gone through it and like dealt with it and not bringing it up ever again. Because there's some people that like they do their own, like whether it's a professional telling them you have to deal with it in a certain way, they do something, I don't know, like maybe they have some kind of good advice that they have them do, and then it's like. And it's done. Like for them, it's like they're over that. I think bridge,
it's funny that you say that, because I do think people experience it's a fact that everyone deals with trauma in different ways, and it's not going to present itself the same in everyone. And some people might not be as affected by the same traumatic event as you would be. So I agree with that, but I also think that sometimes someone, for instance, who has gone through something traumatic may have, like, in a sense, dealt with it, but not really, because they don't see it how that event is impacting their day-to-day lives now. I think it's more of like some people ignore it. I don't think some people don't deal with it. Like I think some people, it's just like it's over, it's done, and you know, it doesn't affect them as much as it might affect someone else. But I think some people will have like in their mind dealt with it, but not realizing how they really haven't dealt with that kind of feeling.
Yeah, no, I mean,
they've just dealt with it enough to continue on with their daily life, but it's almost like I feel, in my personal experience too, like I've had that feeling where like, oh, it's done, it's over with, I've dealt with it, but then the other shoe drops. Something happens where it brings it back up, and you're like, maybe I'm not as, like in my mind, I'm like, maybe I'm not over this, but some people, like, even when the other shoe drops, they're gonna be like, no, like I've dealt with this, it's fine, like they're going to continue to ignore the problem, you know? And I think it goes back to, like, again, everyone does deal with traumatic events differently. There might be a right way to deal with things, but again, because we're all different people, we all experience different things. and have different reactions to different things. It's not gonna there's not like a one size fits all solution, which is like most things in life. But I wanted to kind of bring to light like what exactly trauma is, because I feel like that word is brought up a lot, and I don't want to say it's thrown around, because I do think when people talk about trauma, they do have like the right to like title what they're feeling as traumatic or as their own trauma. But I want to make sure that we like disclose like what is trauma, like by definition. And so like a couple different definitions were like from mind.org.uk is going through very stressful, frightening, or distressing events is sometimes called trauma. And then it says, while these feelings are normal, some people have difficulty moving on with their lives. Psychologists can help them find constructive ways of managing their emotions. Most important, events are traumatic to the degree that they undermine a person's sense of safety in the world and create a sense that catastrophe could strike at any time. Parental loss in childhood, auto accidents, physical violence, sexual assault, military combat experience, the unexpected loss of a loved one are commonly traumatic events. I copied this down because I think the line that says it undermines a person's sense of safety in the world and creates a sense that catastrophe could strike at any time is a really, really good way to look at like what trauma is. Because at the end of the day, like we all want to feel safety in this world. We all want to feel stability. I don't think there's anyone out there that doesn't want those two things of knowing that they're going to be okay at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should all, in a certain way, in our own, obviously, depending on where we live, feel safe, right? And then there's things that we can do to make ourselves feel safe, knowing that the world is obviously, I do believe 100% there's a lot more good out there in the world than there is bad, but just obviously knowing that.
But someone who's gone through something like traumatic is not gonna feel like. Yeah. It's going to feel probably the opposite, that there isn't like as much good out there, or that it's going to make you feel like the world isn't a safe place, or like it's going to destroy your ability to trust people, because if, it just manifests itself in so many ways. And I think the point I want to make clear is that people who've gone through such traumatic things are going to feel like there isn't, like in their day-to-day lives, they're not feeling that sense of safety. And I think that's so important, because like you don't realize how much of an impact that has on someone's ability to function and someone's ability to live a normal life if you don't feel safe, and if you're always on edge and you're always in that fight or flight response of waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I can bring up an example of like I have friends, multiple friends actually, who've gotten pretty bad car accidents on the freeway here in Vegas. And they no longer drive on the freeway. Like they're like, yeah, I'm not gonna like. That event, it was really bad. They're in the hospital, and they're like, yeah, they're avoiding, the freeway because of they had a traumatic event, a traumatic experience on it. And to them, they'll probably getting on it is not good.
I mean, that's essentially what happened to me with my car accident. Yeah. When I got into a car accident in college, I think the thing that clicked in my mind was, for one, that it could happen to anyone, like. Anyone can get in a car accident, and I never thought like that I would be the own cause of the car accident, and it was my fault. Like I didn't see, like I was so focused on the road, like not seeing the light turn, and the light turned around and someone hit me, and like I almost went into the other lane of traffic. And I could, for months after that accident, the only thing I could hear when I got in the car was the sound my car made when someone hit it, and the crashing of metal. And I mean, even now I have anxiety when I drive, or when you drive, or especially when someone else like drives me. And I used to get so frustrated because no one understood it. Like I would get in the car with my parents who they feel like I should trust them. I used to get in the car all the time, and I would be really anxious. And my mom and dad would be like, what? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, I'm just anxious. Like, I don't feel safe. And it's not because of you. It's not that I don't trust you. And that was something I had to explain to you, because you'd be like, you don't trust me. It's like, it's not that I don't trust you. It's that I don't trust anyone in the car right now.
Besides yourself.
Yeah, and even then, I don't, like, I've lost my trust within myself to keep myself safe. So the one person that I should be able to trust is me to keep myself safe, I no longer trust. And that was something that like I'm still avidly trying to work with. Like, and like it got bad one time. Me and Caesar we were in Florida.
Oh wow, yeah.
And we were on
About
the
this.
like, for one, Florida has really dangerous highways to begin with. Like I-4 is one of the like most dangerous like interstates, I think. You could look it up. And we were driving on I-4 and it was pretty busy. Like I think it was like rush hour. And I was getting really nervous and Caesar was getting really frustrated with me because I was really nervous. And he goes, do you want to drive, Sonny? Like, he was like, do you want to drive? He's like, I'm going to pull over here. And he, like, asked the toll booth guy, he's like, can I pull over right here? And he was like, no, like, you can't. Like, it's dangerous. And I was like, well, now, even if you wanted me to drive, I couldn't because now I'm too anxious. And, yeah, it's just interesting, like, that's affected me. That happened, like, close to 4 or 5 years ago. And I still get so scared, like, of car accidents. And I was lucky because my car accident wasn't even that bad. Like I walked out unscathed. Like most of the damage actually to the other person's car and not mine. And
there was no physical damage either. It was just all material. Like the cars got messed up, but like no one got hurt. Like,
no one got hurt. And it's like, thank God. But like from that moment, like I lost trust in my ability to keep myself safe in the car. And then like also that like my trust in other people on the road.
No,
too.
it definitely. I 100% empathize with you on that because I think I've told you the story before. Is that when I was a kid, I think like in 6th grade, we were at a friend's party, like one of my mom's friends' parties, and we were leaving, and there's a guy who pulled out, and I saw him pull out, like he pulled out of the driveway that it was in, and he was like, I'll be right back, and he drove off, like just I see him drive off, and he was apparently intoxicated too as well, and he pulls out, and this other truck, who apparently the driver also was intoxicated, was hauling down the street, really dangerous street, and hits him. And I saw everything from a distance, and the sound, like you said, the sound of the metal and all that. And like, unfortunately, one of the cars went off to the other side of the road and hit some poor like lady with her kid. And I don't think anybody, people got hurt really bad, but I don't think anyone ended up passing away from it. But that moment after, like, I was just like, what in the world happened? Like it got me thinking, like, am I really safe? Like am I really that safe? And I felt like super, I think what I would say is like anxious. Because for a while I just felt like, I'm like, man, I think there's going to be a car accident again. Like, and that was my 6th grade self, trying to like, I wasn't even involved in the accident, but the sound, like you said, this, like, it was the worst sound imaginable. It was like, just, I can't describe it. But to me, I ended up getting over it, just then getting my driver's license and like, oh, okay, I have control. I've had a few near misses before, but never like a car accident. And I thank God for that every day, because
yeah, and I think that like your sense of safety is so important in like your life. I also give it back to like for instance, if we're gonna tie it into like a different example, is I used to joke, well, I still kind of do joke with like my manager about like I'm gonna get fired. Like,
oh yeah,
like this, like not having the sense of safety in my job because I feel like no matter what, I don't have control over like keeping my job, no matter how good of a job I do. I'm like, every time he's like, have a second, or can we get on a call? I'm like, okay, this is it. I'm getting fired. And like, for me, I guess I say I'm lucky in the sense in that this fear that I have continues to drive me to work hard. But like some days I'm like, that fear itself is exhausting, of like always feeling like you don't have a safety, that like anything could happen, and it's not a sustainable way to live your life, to live your life in fear, essentially, that something bad is going to happen and you don't have control over it. Like I think about it in the sense of seeing all the layoffs right now from big companies, and I actually thought about it like in the sense of, I don't think I'll ever work for one of those big companies. Like I used to think that was like a measure of success. Of
like working for Facebook,
Google, or Amazon, Meta. But at this point, I'm like, I don't want to work for any company that would like hire all these people, and then fire all of them because they don't have their ducks in a row. Like that's what it says to me, is like you laying off people not because of the economy. If you actually look at it, not because of the economy, but because poor decisions were made on their part, and now someone else is going to pay the price for poor decisions made on like a management side. And I guess my sense of safety now is like knowing that I think I'm safer working for like smaller companies who maybe also like just really appreciate their employees a little bit more, to know that like 10,000 people getting laid off is, yeah, it might be like 2% of like their company, but that's 10,000 people who now have to find a job. And like, you know, that's scary. Like that, imagine like waking up like one day and like knowing that you didn't do anything wrong and you're fired. And like, for me, that would be something that's like hard to deal with. I think I would again constantly live in the fear that like it's gonna happen again and again and again, and like there's only so many things you can do to protect yourself in those instances.
Yeah.
So I mean, we really just kind of understand how important it is to feel safe in all areas of our life, safe with other people. Like if you've had a bad experience with, like, for instance, people in your life, and they gave you reasons to no longer feel safe around them, you're no longer gonna have, you're always gonna like kind of keep your wits about people. You're gonna like lose your ability to trust people and believe that there's good in people. I know that's something that I've dealt with, is that ability to not know if can trust someone to not do me wrong again, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that that's really important to like talk about. Something else was, it says sufferers of long-term trauma may develop emotional disturbances such as extreme anxiety, anger, sadness, survivor's guilt, dissociation, the inability to feel pleasure, or PTSD. The amygdala becomes hyperactive. Its overreaction to minor perturbations lead to an outpouring of stress hormones, living in defense mode, and ever vigilant to the possibility of threat. People may experience ongoing problems with sleep or physical pain, encounter turbulence in their personal and professional relationships, and feel a diminished sense of self-worth.
It's kind of what we're just talking about. It's like, you know, regarding like, you know, car accident wise. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think people like downplay the idea of like having to be like hyper vigilant and always feeling like on edge. Like that's extremely exhausting. Like, to just not feel safe and to always having to feel like you have to look for like the next bad thing.
Yeah, no, I remember talking to you about this. I know, I think we talked about this on a previous podcast, was like when I'm driving, going back to the automobile, right? Is that you're like super hyper, you know, hyper sensitive or hyperactive in regards to like you're like double checking, triple checking cars and stuff like that, which I think you can use that as a good thing in regards to just knowing what's ahead. You know, knowing a few cars ahead is actually a good thing. So you seeing like the smallest detail, like the car's like about to turn, maybe the driver's not paying attention, XYZ. It can be, you can use that as a good thing for you to stay even more safer. I would say, at least from my own personal like things that I've gone through in regards to driving and the near misses that I've had, those near misses, even though they weren't, I wouldn't say they caused any trauma to me in regards to like car accident wise, but it made me like, oh, I need to double check and triple check, like that car's driving XYZ, whatever's going on. But that's me, you know, I'm not every single person that's driving.
Yeah, but like if you think about it too, like for instance, when we drove from Florida to Las Vegas in 3 days, and we're driving like 12 hours a day. That was like, for one, very hard for me because I was terrified the entire time, and I couldn't sleep in the car. Like,
oh yeah, when I was driving, you're trying to like.
I was like, I had to stay awake because I felt that if I fell asleep, something bad would happen. Like, and so I was exhausted. And granted, I wasn't driving because I was like, I need to let you drive, and at that point I was too anxious to like feel comfortable driving myself, which wasn't the original plan too, is that I wanted to drive originally, and you were like arguing with me.
I forgot about that.
About letting you drive, to the point where I was like, fine, you drive, and now I'm not going to drive. So I was exhausted the entire time. So it just felt like, or like there have been days even now, like if we take it out of like car, like car accidents, or like the fear of like being in the car, is like when I've been like really anxious about like something at work, I'll wake up early and like I won't be able to go back to sleep, so I feel like the need to like start working immediately. Or I have like nightmares about like about work, or when I worked at Target, I would have nightmares all the time about work, about something being left unlocked, or forgetting to do something, and just the fear that like I had messed up. And like that's the worst way to live, is to like have these nightmares about things you have to do. And it's like sounds so silly, like, oh, it was just a nightmare, but it's like when you're having them every night, you're like, shit, I think something's wrong. I thought it was interesting, and I think that something to bring up when we talk about trauma is like how it impacts like your body and like your physical health. And I've been reading this book lately. I'm still reading it. It's taken me a minute to finish it, but it's called The Body Keeps Score, and it's about how trauma impacts like not just your mind, but your physical, like your emotions and your physical health. And so here, even in that like little paragraph, you see like that some people experience like problems with like sleep, like they can't go to sleep, or they can't stay asleep, or or physical pain. And I think the idea that like trauma can cause physical pain is just absolutely insane. Like you can feel actual pain from trauma, and it just kind of shows you how everything in your body's connected.
The mind body soul connection affects everything. So like if your mind is constantly on the go and go, or feeling a certain way, obviously you're going to feel like pain. I never knew that someone would actually feel pain in regards to like how traumatic like of an experience that someone had. I know when people like amputees, people who had for some reason had to get their
it's like phantom limb,
phantom pain and all that. And I've heard from people talking about how painful it feels, because they feel like it's there, but then like they feel like when it was getting cut off.
And it's just, so like, crazy because like for instance, if you take it in the count of like phantom limb pain, it's like the limb is not there, yet you feel like it is, and you feel pain in it. And like it's crazy because like no one can tell that person that they're not feeling physical pain,
because they don't have
it there. Because they are, but it's like to someone looking on the outside, it might not make sense because like, well, it's not there. It's like, but sometimes I don't think the mind connects those two. Like there's not that connection that like there is no pain because it's not there. Like the way that the impact that your thought process and that your mind has is so important. Like if your mind can't put together 2 and 2, that for one, your limb is gone, so therefore there shouldn't be no pain, like you're not going to be able to stop that pain. And so it really, I feel like when we talk about trauma, and we'll get probably into this later in the episode about like how you deal with trauma, is you have to kind of rewire your brain to like function again. And it's not an easy process to like try to change your mind. And that's why it's like when we talk about like, we've talked a couple of times about growth mindsets and changing the way we think, like we say these things, but in practice, they're very difficult, especially if you're dealing with types of trauma, because there are trained professionals that are still trying to figure out like what's the best approach and what's going to help each individual person, because each individual person is different. And I can't tell you what works for me is going to work for you. Like even in our relationship, me and you, when it comes to like our emotions, deal with them very differently. I usually need to talk to someone. I need to feel like validated, but you like to deal with things sometimes like on your own, and I can't be like, you're wrong for that, because that's maybe what you need to do. And it's so important to like, I think when we talk about trauma too, people are like, well, I went through the same thing and don't feel that way, so I don't understand. And it's like, well, you don't understand because just because you felt this way about something doesn't mean someone else is going to feel that way. Like because everyone is so different, everyone takes experiences like in different ways. Like for you to justify someone's like, or not justify someone's feelings based on the fact that you went through the same thing and didn't experience the same thing is so crappy of like people. It just shows like a lack of empathy, and that's what, I mean, me and you have talked about that, because when we have arguments sometimes you'll be like, well, I don't do this. And I'm like, well, I'm not you, like, and we're two different people. So the argument like, well, I don't feel that way. It's like, well, I do, because I'm not the same as you, and we feel differently about different things. So it's people need to understand that just because me and you might have gone through the same exact thing doesn't mean the way that you processed it is wrong or the way that I processed it is wrong.
Yeah, again, like you said, we're all different people. I even bring that up whenever we've had that discussion. It's like, yeah, no, I'm obviously my own separate I got my own different thought processes and whatnot, but yeah, we just deal with things differently.
Yeah.
You know?
And so I wanted to kind of go further into like how it impacts our bodies. And I think the first thing that I wrote down was that traumatic experience can affect and alter our perception. So it kind of alters our own reality in a sense of like what we see the world as. Like, I imagine if you've gone through something super traumatic, especially if it was like, you know, on like doing something you do normally, like you're gonna see your daily life, like it's gonna change. You're gonna see the world differently, and you're not gonna be able to see it for what it is. You're gonna see it from what that experience made you feel like it was.
This is one of the difficult things I guess I have a hard time empathizing with, because I haven't had anything from my own perspective traumatic happen to me. You know, whether it's family related, car accidents, you name it, like. And I hope and pray to God that never happens. I never have to deal with anything like that.
That's crazy that you say that.
What do you mean?
That you haven't had one thing.
Well, no, the thing is that, again, this is where it's, to me, I resonate things that are traumatic to things that cause physical pain. But then also there's the emotional pain, which is why, I actually, now that I think about it, maybe I have. But I've dealt with it. Dealt with it, right? I've associated like how I was able to, you know, move on and go over that bridge, you know, preventing me from moving forward. So once I did that, now I know, okay, I have lessons learned and X, Y, Z, fill in the blank, you name it. So I would say that's why, like, part of my process is like it's
not acknowledging that anything happened,
not acknowledging that it existed. Yeah, because for me, at least,
do that.
See, for me, at least for me, again. If I constantly think about those situations,
it's gonna make you sad.
It's gonna make me sad. Maybe not even. It's gonna make me think like, what's the point of doing X, Y, Z? Like, and then just not do anything at all, and it holds you back. At least that's my perspective. That's how I feel. So for me, it's like I acknowledge that stuff happened, but I try not to like think about it. I guess Put
it in a box.
Not put it in a box per se. Not put it in a box. More of like, you know, put it in a box and bury it, and then you know, and have a whole, like, you know, when someone passes away,
it's like a time capsule just waiting to be unraveled.
You pay your respects to it. You're like, hey, like that part, you know, yeah.
Oh, you are wild.
Well, that's me though, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's you. Me and you deal with like traumatic experience, emotions like way differently. My dad's the same way though. My dad literally said to me in a text one time, he was like, I just like bundle these emotions and lock them away, and I'm like, how do you do that? Because also I don't think that's the right way, but you know, to each their own. Something else that when we talk about how trauma impacts like our bodies, it's like if you remove the stressor and the body's hormones should respond like as the stressor is removed. Like if you remove it, like you shouldn't feel the way you feel anymore, essentially. But the problem is someone who's exposed to trauma may continue to produce those hormones as if they're still in that event. They're reliving it, and your body is like your hormones are reacting in that way. So like one of like the stress hormones is like cortisol, and like so you might have like higher cortisol even though like you're not actually back in that traumatic event. And The Body Keeps Score, that book I'm reading, also talks about it, how like when they did tests with people who had dealt with like trauma, like there was this couple who had been in a really bad car accident and they both responded differently. Like one completely disassociated and the other, I can't remember what the other did, but they were a couple and they responded too differently. And like when you even recall, like if you read them the script of like what happened, their body responded as if it was happening right now. And like the hormones did, and you could see like the brain scans of like the areas of the brain that were getting like, you know, that were activated during that time. And like even like after they couldn't, those areas wouldn't calm down. And so I think that's interesting is that like, in like a perfectly linear world, when the stress is gone, you would not feel that your hormones would go back to normal and your sense of safety would go back to normal. But for a lot of people who experience trauma, it doesn't. And they live this life where it's like those, like they're not living at like normal level. They don't have those normal levels and the, you know, the luxury of kind of being able, that balance that we need within our body. Because essentially like it's a balance, like I don't know, there's that word like that we learned in science, homeostasis, like the tendency towards a relatively stable equilibrium equilibrium between independent elements, especially as maintained by physiological processes. So like we're in like homeostasis, I think is like just the, if I'm wrong, I might be wrong, but it's just like, the balance between in the body. And some studies show that trauma can make you more vulnerable to developing like physical health problems, including long-term or chronic illnesses. And I think that's just, there's nothing in my mind to like, no word to actually copulate what I think about that, but it's just wild how, even if it's just like one event, like just one very, very bad event, or a series of events that can like cause physical health problems. And I think we don't realize, or like from the outside looking in, someone might have gone through something really bad and they might be like holding it together, but like you also don't know underlying, like it might be affecting like their physical health, and like if your physical health is off, it's also going to impact your mental health. And it's just this downward spiral of like things are just going like what feels like against you,
Yeah. I mean, we've all seen it. I think, especially if you've gone through something traumatic, like let's say a car accident, like you may obviously not want to drive or move around as much. So I can see like obviously causing like other health problems too, or anything else, right? Like you just like box yourself and close yourself off to the world kind of thing,
yeah.
So.
Well, for instance, there was in the beginning of the book, The Body Keeps Score, this the psychologist, like he's a PhD, he talks about like one of the first people he dealt with was a veteran. And so at the time, the huge thing that was like kind of an innovation was, medication, like treating depression and anxiety with medication. And this veteran was having trouble sleeping, obviously due to combat, and he saw a lot of his friends like die. And so he prescribed a medication to help him sleep and to hopefully get rid of some of the nightmares he was having, because that's why he couldn't sleep. And the veteran comes back and the therapist asks him, like, how you doing? Like, how did the pills work? And he goes, I couldn't take them because I was like, I don't want to erase the memory of my friends who died, because he felt like that wasn't doing them justice.
Damn.
That it wasn't like, he didn't want to forget them because, as traumatic as the experience was, he didn't want to forget them and like make it seem like they had died in vain, because they didn't. And so I think that that's interesting because like, I think with trauma, I've gone through a couple of things throughout the years, and I'm not comparing like that. Like a veteran has like way more trauma than, I'll ever have. Like my life is a lot easier than someone who's experienced like combat or, seen someone killed, or that's some stuff that I couldn't imagine having to work through. But some of the things I dealt with, I've struggled to get over, because as shitty as they were for me, I felt that if I erased it from my memory, that the people involved in the hurt would be kind of off the hook,
Mm-hmm.
And when I read that about the veteran, I thought like, this is what I'm doing, is that I'm not forgetting what happened, because deep down, I want someone to kind of pay for what they've done, and that's not up to me. It's not up to me to say that, to keep this on my heart and keep reliving what happened in my situation, to hope that one day someone's going to see it differently,
Yeah.
And I think that I think a lot of people do that, as they have a hard time to let go of what happened to them. One, because it really does shape how you live your life from there on, like if, for instance, I imagine if you lost a loved one, like you don't want to, especially if they died like tragically, like you don't want to forget them, because like that was someone in your life, but that might also be causing you some type of pain. So how do you like move on?
Yeah, that's really hard.
Yeah,
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I mean, I lost my friend Angel when I was in 8th grade. She died from cancer, and like I feel like in 8th grade you're still pretty like young, and like you don't like quite understand that things happen in the world. And I remember like thinking just like not, I almost feel like I never processed it, you know, I never processed that she was gone. I remember, like, in the moments after her death, she lived in my neighborhood, and I would walk past her house, and I'm like, I can't conceptualize that she's not actually in there, that she's not in her house, and that I can't knock on the door and her answer.
Yeah.
And, like, for a long time after, I couldn't recognize that she was gone, even though she was. And it's weird. It was, like, a weird thing for me, and, like, I imagine, like, it's the same, just similar for people who have lost someone. It's like you don't know how to, like, deal with, like, them not being there anymore. Like, and, like, that's traumatic for some people because, like, you know, we live on connections and, like, you know, we want to have, like, if you lose someone that's really close to you, like sometimes people feel like, how does life continue on without this person that had such an impact? Like,
that's a really difficult thing to answer. I mean,
I'm not trying to provide answers because I don't know. I also, like,
I have no idea where to even start.
She's probably one of the, not the only person that I've lost in my life, but that was the first one where I was, like, having to come to terms with, like, people die and people die suddenly, and I think, especially when you're young, it can shape you differently. I don't think it, like, negatively. Well, I think it was obviously a very negative thing that happened. What I took from that is that, you know, life is, like, precious and that we aren't guaranteed tomorrow. That was the whole thing, that after my friend Angel died, it was like, we really aren't guaranteed tomorrow. Like, people get cancer, which is what she had, and, like, people, and even then later, later in my life, like, my mom got cancer, and that was I felt like I was looking, like, even though I wasn't, like, going through it, like, I felt like I was looking death in the face. And I couldn't imagine what my mom was going through. And even thinking that, like, she made it through that, I'm like, I don't know how. Because that would have been so, so difficult for me to realize, like, I don't know. Sorry, I went on a tangent. But, like, yeah, it's just crazy how it really impacts us.
Yeah.
And then, so this is, like, how we talked about this a little bit earlier, but, you know, how different people deal with trauma differently. It says, when people experience the same traumatic event, some will be fine while others will be radically changed. And I think that's where the disconnect comes from, is, like, if you and me were both involved in the same, it's so funny because I think we were. Me and you have been involved in essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
And the way we chose to deal with it was very different.
Yeah.
Like, and I think when we've talked about it, there's been some contention because we both have our own way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
And, like, we've had to, like, kind of figure out how we come together in the sense of, like, understanding why we deal with things a certain way. And I think that's something that we both had a hard time understanding, is, like, I think I literally said this to you last night. I was like, I don't understand how this doesn't hurt you when it hurts me. And, like, you're like, it's not that it doesn't hurt me, it's that, like, I just deal with things differently. It's like, it's different. And I think we've had so many conversations where we're trying to come to meet each other where we're at. And I don't know, it's the perfect example, as, like, people will deal with the same thing differently. Or, like, me and my sister, we've gone through similar things in our life, and we have completely two different ways of carrying on to moving forward. And we're twins, like, we almost got almost the same DNA, and, like, we just have such different ways of processing our emotions. And it doesn't mean either one of us is wrong for doing it that way, you know. It doesn't mean that I'm right and you're wrong, or that I do think that there's always better ways to figure out what's gonna, like, help you move forward and grow and, you know, continue to live a full life. But it's not our place to be like, you're doing this wrong. Or my favorite thing is when people are like, you should have gotten over that already. It's like, who are you to tell me that I should have gotten over it? Like, when you don't know what the overall impact it had on my entire life, you know? Mm. And I think when we talk about trauma, people on the outside often lack in empathy, which I think is important, but also it's really just empathy, being able to see something from someone's perspective and feel what they feel. And I don't think you have to have gone through what they went through to empathize with the fact that something inevitably changed the way that they see life and continuing life.
Everyone has had their own different battles in life, you know, that they've dealt with or reasoned with. That's the other thing too, reasoning with the situation. whether it's, you know, looking at it from a logical perspective. I feel like I do that a lot. That's probably one of the reasons why I feel like where we have that, you know, different.
You calling me illogical, sister?
No, I'm just saying more of like either
you take facts and data and
Yeah.
you like you're putting like a puzzle together.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
I am taking my emotions and I'm just like dwelling in them. I'm just
Yeah.
like, this is how I feel. And I don't think I don't use like facts and data, but I think like when your emotions are so heavy, it's hard to like
put them together.
it's hard to put them together
Yeah.
and like realize what the path forward is when you're so sad.
Yeah, when you're in the emotional. I mean, that's the difficult part. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'm reading a few books where like if you're in a continual like emotional state, it's hard for you to make a logical decision. So like if, you know, God forbid, I don't want to get too dark here and make some kind of dark story, but like God forbid you had to make a logical decision that like meant that you had to like do something to save someone's life, but that also meant that you had to, you know, take someone's life. But it was the logical thing to do because it was in like, let's say, self-defense, or they were going to do a bunch of damage to a bunch of people, or whatever the case is. And like a lot of people not a lot of people, I wouldn't know the actual data or numbers behind it, but I would say if you're in an emotional state, you might just freeze, you know, like a deer in the headlight situation.
Well, that's
you
the
know?
thing is
So,
like that's the other thing is people process like situations differently, especially
Yeah.
when they're happening. So like there's fight or flight, like you fight or you like
you run, you
run,
hide. Yeah.
but then some people just freeze or they become numb and they disassociate. And like it's especially like this book goes into like a lot of different types of trauma, but like it brings up how your sense of safety is also distorted. Like so if you take into account that like, you know, the statistics are so sad, but like a lot of people do unfortunately suffer from like child abuse, and that's what this book talks about too. And it's like because that's your like if your baseline isn't normal already, the way that you then perceive the world is going to be kind of off. And you might, like, people who, like, suffer abuse are more likely to get into abusive relationships when they're older because of that.
Yeah, they're like, yeah.
And, like,
Yeah.
it's not, like, it's
sad.
not their fault because, like, that was their
Yeah.
baseline, and that their sense of safety was like, actually unsafe. And,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's hard, and those people, like, he talks about, like, you know, therapy that he has with people, and it's, I think more people should read this book because it's really enlightening as to, like, why we are the way we are and why people deal with things a certain way and how drastically different people's way of dealing with things changes per situations that he talks about. And we all just have a different, like, some people just don't even fight. They just freeze and they disassociate. They become numb. And, like, for what I feel like none of them is, like, a right thing. It's, like, you're going to be, for me, I'd be traumatized in any situation where, like, even if I was able to, like, for instance, like, I was in a situation where I had to, like, for instance, fight. I don't think I'd ever recover from, even if I survived.
Yeah.
It's just, like, I'd never want to be put in those situations. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control over that. It's just so different for everyone, and I wish more people understood that, like, kind of similar to, feel like we say this very frequently on podcasts, like, you don't know what someone's going through, and, like, to not, like, really judge the way they portray themselves one day, or, like, you know, maybe, like, give people the benefit of the doubt, you know, that they're maybe just going through something. And, like, I'm not, like, I just think people lack a, like, certain kindness of understanding that, like, we're all just trying to survive in this world. And,
Yeah.
like, sometimes surviving is, like, just difficult. The getting up in the morning is difficult, especially if you're dealing with things in your past and actively trying to have a better future. There's so many things that impact our day-to-day. Like, to be honest, that's why some days I'm like, I'm just proud I've made it another day, because honestly, all of this is hard. All of this is difficult sometimes when you're trying to deal with your past while protecting your future and living in the present. It's difficult because I think we all, in the efforts to become a better person, you have to look at your past to see what shaped me. You have to think about your future to see where you want to go, but you also have to live in the present to actively work towards that future version of yourself. And all of those together are, like, it's stressful, and I think at times it can be overwhelming, especially if you don't have like a support system, or if a support system or someone, at least one person to talk to, or balance. Like there's so many things that can impact the way we proceed forward in life, especially after trauma, and it's just not always easy.
Trying to pursue anything in life, whether it's obviously dealing with past situations in your life, it's never going to be easy. Yeah. And no one's saying, I hope that people don't understand that or don't get that it is.
Well, I think some people, like when I think about people who think it's easy, like I saw this TikTok, which is always what I bring up. I saw this TikTok where this guy was like, you only work for 8 hours a day and you sleep for like 8 hours a day. That leaves so many hours to do so many things, and like, just get off your ass. I'm like, that is like, I get that works for some people. Some people need the get off your ass and go work, and they need that kind of motivation. But to like, then like someone like me who's scrolling like, you're a lazy piece of shit, like why aren't you working? I'm like, I feel attacked right now. Like I feel like you are coming in with not a lot of information and telling me that I'm lazy. I'm not. Like it's different things for different people. So I know that for some people it works and it's super motivational, but like at the same time, like we all need different types of rest. I read like something the other day that was like people who get 6 hours of sleep or less a night are more likely to like have like heart disease, or like to like some like cardiovascular issues. And you're like, well, like in this hustle culture, people are like, go, 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 go. Like everything is so counter like productive, like, or counterintuitive. I don't know. So that's how I feel. Like sometimes I see these things and I'm like, oh, I really want to be there, but like also like not getting down on myself just because that's not the way I do life, like.
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with, getting, a good amount of sleep. I forget the number. It's like what, 4 to 6 hours is what you need, or
no, like if you get less than 6, it's bad for you. But again, it's per person. I know people who have like function like on, I learned in psychology that not everyone needs the same amount of sleep, but like I think of myself as someone who just loves a good snooze. Like I love sleeping, and maybe it's just because I'm sad a lot, or just because I get depressed, or but I do love sleep, but I get down on myself when I don't get up early, and like I've definitely been like down that wormhole where it's like I gotta be up at 5 a.m. or I'm not gonna have a productive day, and
that's me.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I would love to get up at 5 a.m., but then, like, when I'm crashing at 12 because I'm tired.
Or because you can't sleep. That's the other thing, too.
Yeah, or because I can't sleep, and then me sleeping in, and then I'm like, am I lazy because I slept until 7? Or, I don't know. I just think, different things for different people. I don't think, like, you're lazy if you don't get up at 5 a.m. I also don't think, like, it's just whatever works for you, right? But I think like to kind of close this up, it was like think about like how do you deal with trauma, and I was kind of looking up answers like what is the best way to deal with your trauma, and I don't think there's one right answer. I think the first thing is like recognizing when you need help, or like outside help specifically, because I like to think a lot of us think of our friends as like therapists, like we vent to our friends about like the things that are going on in our lives, but at what point do you get professional help? At what point do you realize, hey, I need to talk to someone who can like help me have healthy coping skills, or can help me deal with this? Because as great as our friends are, like, I don't know about you, but none of my friends are actually licensed therapists. Yeah. So,
I mean, nor would it be a healthy thing if they were. I think most of them would tell you.
Because you need to like, you need someone without a bias. You need someone who, has training to do it. And, that's something I really, I think the only thing that I think about though too is like the accessibility of that. Like therapy or like seeing a professional can be expensive if they don't accept insurance, or like, if you don't have insurance. Like the accessibility of like mental health is still like not really great. So that's like a barrier too, is like not being able to see someone because you don't have the means to, or like, and I think everyone deserves to, be able to talk through those things, to talk through your trauma, and like find a solution that helps you have a fruitful and happy life. But also I think there's things that, we can do on our own to, in the meantime, to kind of make our lives better. And I think it's just sitting down and really, you got to be self-aware of what's going on. Like, what are you doing? What active habits do you have? What bad habits do you have? What is contributing negatively to your life? And again, I've talked about this. It is so hard to be like your own, like,
worst enemy.
Well,
isn't it more?
Well, it's not hard for me to be
worst
my own
enemy,
worst enemy. I am my own worst enemy. But like, it's hard to be very self-critical.
Yeah.
And like to look at yourself and like, yeah, this is actually very bad. Like, remember what I'm gonna wait. Sorry, I keep hitting this microphone. Happened the other week. And you said it to me yesterday. You're like, man, I need to stop drinking. And I was like, that's so funny that you say that, because a couple weeks ago, I told Caesar, I said, you drink too much. And he got so angry. And he told me yesterday, he goes, you know why I got angry? Was because it was true.
Way to air that out for the whole world.
Sorry.
No, I mean, it's just.
It's vulnerable.
I know
like,
it
we're
is.
talking about.
I know
it's
it
not
is,
like
but
Caesar's an alcoholic.
No, I'm not. It's just I realized that, like, even if, let's say, you drink like a glass of wine every week or whatever, you know how you're talking about like a bad habit that you have.
Yeah.
It leads to, like, all right, you drink and then X, Y, Z. Like, it can lead to other bad habits or other things that are not good for you, which is what I'm trying to say. Is like, that's why I got defensive about it, because it was true. Yeah, and I think most of us do. Like, if we, you do.
Caesar's like, yeah. Caesar's always like, for instance, like, I have a very bad snacking habit. I love snacks.
And I tell her all the time.
And Caesar does tell me. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I just want a snack, okay? Like, do I not deserve to eat snacks? And like, becomes a defensive thing, because like, we don't want to recognize that, like, something, especially for instance, like, snacks make me so happy. Like, it feels like the one sense of relief in my day.
It's like your stress reliever.
It's like my cigarette, basically.
It's your coping habit. That's what it is.
Yeah, I do, and it's bad. It's bad that food is like
really
the way
bad.
that I cope with the world. But yeah, and when you say that to me, I do get defensive, because I'm like, well, if I take away this, what do I have? What do I have to make me happy?
With something else,
yeah, you got to replace it. So we both got defensive.
Replacing it, or figuring out a way to like deal with it, like I actually deal with it, so
so that's something I gotta talk to a therapist with, is like, why do I use food to cope with everything in my life? There's just different ways to deal with the trauma that we go through, and that I think that the most important thing I want to get through is that I think there is a life after trauma. I think that we should be able to live happy and healthy and fruitful lives after we experience traumatic events. I just think so often we don't, because we don't have the resources, or, we're not, like, the way we think about it is not necessarily healthy. Like, we're not recognizing how something's affecting us, and I don't think a lot of us can. Like, we're not experts, like, we're not, but how can you become an expert on yourself? How can you become, like, know yourself better?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you think that you know yourself, but then, like, I think I've learned more recently as I've begun to, like, really think about growth, and, starting this podcast, I learned a lot about, why am I the way why am I the way that I am? What is causing me to feel this way? And when you start to ask yourself those questions, you start to get answers. You start to really think, and
you may not like the answers too.
Yeah,
I know I haven't liked my answers either, so,
you may not like the answers, but it's a beautiful process, because like, I think about all the pain and like absolute heartbreak, like moments where I just felt like I was getting like physically stabbed. Like I felt physical pain in the past 3 years, and like, as shitty as all of that was, like, I've started to understand myself so much better, and like, it's allowed me to think about where my life could go versus like where I am. Like, as shitty as it is to like, know that I'm working on making my life better, and right now it doesn't feel like it's changing, I know that I have the tools to have a better life. And I think that that's what people need to do, is just realize, like, what can I do? And like, just take, again, I say this all the time, just take the next best step. And it's not an overnight thing. It's, some people will be working for years to like kind of uncover like the things that they need to understand themselves. And I still don't fully understand myself. I still don't know, haven't been able to change some of those bad habits or some of those things that I don't necessarily like about myself. But I'm working towards it, and I think that's what's important, is that you're working towards it. And if you can Like, if you do have the, privilege to go and see someone, I think you should. Like, I think that should be on everyone's, like, list of, like, I need to see someone who's experienced in this. And also just, I think community is important. Having people, like, even...
Yeah, community is key, for sure.
We're meant for connection, and I think some of the things that have gotten me through, like, really negative times, despite not being able to get professional help, is... leaning on, like, my friends and, like, obviously, like, you, and, like, it's great to have people in your life that make you feel like you have a place in this world. So that's trauma. That's our conversation on trauma. I feel, like, so bad when I talk about, like, these kind of, like, very, like, important subjects, but, like, they're kind of, like, depressing, because I want people to be happy, like, when they listen to this podcast. But I also think it's so important to talk about, because I think it's a part of growth is recognizing, like, where trauma is playing a part in your life. And I think often, like, we don't recognize, like, how our actions or our emotions or our health is even impacted by what we've gone through.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up. I always forget to say this in the beginning, but if you're listening to our podcast on YouTube, please subscribe. We are growing slowly but surely. We do have a couple guests planned for the coming weeks, so I'm really excited about it. If you're listening on a podcast platform like Apple, Spotify, or any podcast platform, please also subscribe, like, get, like, automatic downloads for our podcast. I'm pretty sure you can set that up. And just leave a review. Tell us what you think. Tell us what topics you want us to go into, or, anything. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say, Cesar?
No, I think, again, like we said in the beginning, we're not professionals. We're just voicing our story of things that we've dealt with in our own personal lives.
This has been Growing Together with me, Sunny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
We hope that you have a great week, and tune in next week for another episode.
See you guys later.